Hello there. I am making this video as a help aid to a fellow Godotian on Facebook who was struggling with getting dashing or sprinting to work. I just set up a really basic, simple project here, just using the famous Godot sprite as my little placeholder, and use that as my tile map as well. And just real simple mechanics. Up here we have some variables. We set our velocity to vector2.0, which is just another way of writing vector2 0, 0. So it's the same thing. We set. Wait, what? Oh, there we go. I put a dot in there. I was wondering why there was an error. 800 gravity, which you see down here, that we set our velocity.y to a plus equals gravity times delta. And of course we set everything. We set our velocity to the move and slide for the kinematic body 2D, which is the player in this scene. And inside that parentheses velocity and vector2.up, just to kind of set what direction our gravity would be going and everything. Where the floor versus the ceiling would be. So we have gravity. We set our walk speed at 200 initially. I actually created a dash for this video because I didn't understand that the person I was speaking with actually didn't really mean dash. He meant just sprint. Just if you hold a button down, then your normal movement speed increases, versus when you push a button or double tap or something and your character just shoots to the side really quickly and then stops. But we're going to go ahead and handle both of those things in this video since I put this work in. So we have a walk speed of 200, and then our dash speed. When you tap the dash button, you'll burst forward at this number instead. And then we have our jump speed at minus 600. A couple Boolean variables that I use to kind of turn things off and on. And then a variable for direction, so we know which way the player is facing. In a simple process function, doesn't need to be physics. I just use this process function to handle a couple small housekeeping items. One being the direction. If I had just gotten done pressing left, that's why I said just pressed, then it'll set direction to -1. And then if I had just pressed right, it'll set it to 1. Then I can use this stored negative or positive 1 value to determine other things later on. And then if I had just pressed the dash button, we're going and dashing, the variable, the Boolean dashing, was already at false. We're going to launch a little function that I created that I just called dash. Rather than changing and doing all the motion in the physics process, the dashing motion in the physics process, I found it actually worked a lot better to just create its own little function that fires once when you want to do a dash. But anyway, so whenever the dash button is just pressed and that it's set to false, we'll go ahead and launch that dash function. The reason I say and dashing is false is because maybe I don't want to do a dash while I'm already dashing. So if I'm in the state of dashing and I press dash again, it will have no effect. You could leave this out if you wanted to just be able to infinitely dash. That would be fine too. And then the idea of sprinting is actually really super simple. You don't have to worry about all the problems that we had discussed in the Facebook post about this. Basically, all I do is just, if I'm holding the sprint button down, then we're just going to change walk speed from 200 to 500. and if the sprint button is not held down, then we return the walk speed back to 200. That way, here in my basic physics process, in the part where I deal with walking left and right, I say if input is action press left and we're not dashing, then we're going to set our x velocity to walk speed, which, whether I'm sprinting or not, it's still going to be walk speed. But if I'm sprinting, it'll just be a higher walk speed, and if I'm not, it'll be lower walk speed. So that makes things a lot easier, rather than plugging in different variables depending on if I'm pressing the button down. I just do one piece of code for left, one piece of line of code for right, with that one walk speed variable that just gets modified if I'm pressing a button or not. That makes things easier. Now this, doing it as a linear interpretation, a lerp, it just makes it so that if I'm walking left and then I stop and then start to walk right, it will take whatever my last velocity was and gradually change it to the walk speed or the negative walk speed, whichever way I'm going, with this value for a... I want to have the same value on both left and right. That was a little mistake I'd missed. What do I want to do it as 0.2 or 0.1? Let's do it at 0.2 for both. I was playing around with the numbers back and forth. I'd forgotten to change it for both. Which is why it would actually be easier to, instead of plug this number in, create a variable up here and just call it, I don't know, lerp rate, perhaps, and then call it 0.2, and then that way, instead of doing a different value for each thing, I just plug in the variable. That will prevent making silly mistakes like I just made, where I had forgotten to put the number on both. Anyway, so yeah, I did this. That way, as I change direction or start walking from a standstill, and especially whenever I dash, if I'm moving across the screen at this 900 number, and then the dash stops, and if I'm dashing right and I push left, I don't want to just be joot, joot. I want to be like joot, slow down and then come back the other way. So just using a lerp just for walking in general really smooths that out and makes things look much nicer. I'm sure there are other ways to do it, many better ways other people can do, using tweens and different things, or using like a max velocity and doing clamp and all that stuff. But for now, just to keep it really simple and to try to make it less confusing for people that are on a more beginner level, I just went ahead and did this. And you don't have to do this. You could just say velocity equals walk speed, and then you would be just fine. But this is the way I made it look a lot smoother, a lot nicer. And then I said if input action left is not being pressed, okay, and same thing for right. So if we're not pressing left or right, then we're going to go ahead and change our velocity from whatever speed we were going at to 0. Again, I could have just said velocity.x equals 0, but it's just much nicer. Looks a lot smoother this way. If you're on the floor, I just set it so that it's not constantly trying to gravity is not constantly trying to move the character down, so we set the velocity to 0 if you're touching the floor. I just did a jump reset variable, so that way if I jump up in the air and press jump again while I'm still in the air, I won't keep jumping. So jump reset gets set to true every time I touch the floor. And if I am on the floor and jump reset is true and I press the jump button, it's going to let me jump. It's going to set my velocity, my y velocity, to the jump speed, but it's also going to set this to false, so I can't keep jumping again because it's going to check if it's true. And then if I'm not on the floor, we're going to also put jump reset to false. The reason for that is if I run and walk off the ledge and start dropping, I don't want to be able to jump in midair. Now, if you like that idea, to be able to jump after falling off of a ledge, then leave this off, or don't even put this in there. But if you want a more realistic where you don't just jump out of thin air, then you'll need to do this, so when you walk off the ledge, you'll be set. We, of course, set our gravity here, and then I already explained all this before. Okay, so now back to the dash. So whenever I did is action just pressed and then the dash button, it's going to it's going to launch this function that I created down below called dash. And so when this function fires, when this function fires, we're going to immediately set dashing from false to true, because up here, if you remember, whenever I press the button, it also is checking that to make sure dash is already false. So I don't like double dash or whatever, unless you want to do that. So anyway, it's going to set it to true, so I can't dash again until everything's done here. It's going to set my x velocity now to dash speed times direction. That way, if I was facing left and my direction variable is at a -1, then I'll dash at this 900 dash speed, but times -1, so to the left. And same thing if it's times 1 if I was going to the right. So we have that, so we do dash speed times direction. Now, I don't like to do yields anymore now that I'm pretty comfortable with using a timer, but I just did it this way just to keep it really simple and easy to follow. Normally I would go over here and I would add a timer node, and then I would have my function call the call out that timer and launch the timer, set a wait time, and then I'd have the timer do a signal that would tell my code to do something else. For now, though, just to keep it simple, I just did a yield, get tree, create timer, and I thought 0.3 seconds was a good time. And when the timer finishes counting down this time, it's going to let the rest of my code fire. So basically, this pauses my code of this function here until this times out, and then we go ahead and then do the rest of this stuff. So initially we started giving our velocity this dash speed times direction after the timer times out. Then we're going to gradually slow down from whatever speed we were to 0 at this rate. I did a much smaller number to make it a more gradual slowdown. And then at that point, then we set dashing back to false. And that's important because up here where we did our code for walking left and walking right, if I'm in mid-dash and I don't want to have my player just suddenly in the middle of the dash turn around if I was dashing right and then hit the left button, I want to make sure that I say that if I press left, it's going to do this, or if I press right, it's going to do this, but only if we are not in a state of dashing. So that's how I get it so that my directional buttons, once I start a dash, don't actually affect my dash. Okay? So at the beginning of the dash function, dash is set to true. So that means that my directional buttons won't work. At least my left and right won't work until this yield timer finishes, and then now we set it back to false. So that way now we can get going. We can then start using our directional buttons to walk left and right after that, but not until then. Okay, so that's how we dash, and Sprinting is just such a simple thing. Basically, if the button is pressed, I sprint. If the button is not pressed, I don't sprint. If the button is pressed, I change my walk speed to a higher speed. If it's not pressed, then I put it back to a slower walking speed. It's actually really simple, no problem there. Now, where it would get a little bit more complex is if we tried to do double tapping the directional button, which is a very popular way to do things in a lot of games, a lot of beat 'em ups, a lot of platformers. If you double tap to the left, 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 and hold it down, then you'll sprint to the left, and so on and so forth. If you want me to do that, I can do another video and add that to this little project, change it up a little bit. Just let me know, and we'll go from there. Oh, I guess I should probably demonstrate what I created before I sign off on this video. So here we go. Play this. I actually have the controls mapped to a controller. This is my left joystick on my controller, like an Xbox type controller. Nice slow movement, a little bit glitchy there with the collision, but that's all right. If I hold R2 down, there's my sprint. Now I'm sprinting. Notice, by the way, how when he stops going one direction, goes the other. It's a nice smooth transition. Same thing here. Kind of smooth. I could change the rate on my lerp to make it even more gradual if I wanted to. Like, let's see. Let's do that. Let's do that just for fun. Where was that? Yeah, down here in the physics process. Yeah, let's change the lerp rate to 0.05. And now we'll see how much more gradual the turnaround would be. And even just starting from stopping. See how much slower he got it going? So boom, boom. A little bit sluggish if that's the kind of character that you have. A big juggernaut, maybe. See how? Alright, so anyway, that's walking, turning around, and also using the sprint button. Sprint button on, sprint button off. Sprint button on, sprint button off. And what's cool is because we're lerping from whatever our current speed was to the speed that we want, he even gradually slows back down to walking speed. So it looks a lot nicer. I don't know why it's so glitchy and shaky. I could probably fix some settings to do that. Okay, but anyway, dash, I did R1. So R2 is sprint. R1 is the dash. So I just click it, and he jumps forward. You can even dash in midair. Now, obviously, if you don't like dashing in midair, then you can change it so that this only happens if on floor. All right, and I'm going to dash and try to hold the... So, like, I'm about to dash to the left, but I'm going to immediately push the stick to the right. And you see, it didn't affect the dash. Whoops. So I'm going to dash to the right, but I'm clicking the left and it wasn't doing anything. Whoops. So dashing to the right, but joystick left didn't do anything. Dashing to the left, joystick right didn't do anything. So there you go. And there's our jump. Oops. We can dash in midair, and we can dash off of the platform, and there's no problem. I know that was one of the first questions you had in your Facebook post, was how to keep your momentum going even if you dash off of the platform. I think I'd addressed that in one of my comments to you, but I mean, basically, let's see. Yeah, I think maybe you had done something like you had put the if is on floor, or you'd put your speed variables for dashing underneath an if is on floor condition, which meant that the minute you run off of the platform, you're not on the floor anymore, so it stops doing your speed. So yeah, but that's a pretty simple fix, I think. Alright, anyway, I know this video is getting long. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Let me know what you think, and if I can explain anything any better to you. Or if you want me to start working on a video for you on covering how to do double tap input, to go ahead and start that. Oh, one last thing too, just to let you know, I had some weird input maps. I initially did some keyboard, and I started with the home keys, J, K, and L. For J was for jump, K was for sprinting, and L was for the dash. And then I had, for left and right, I had the A key for left, the D key for right. But sometimes a weird thing that happens in Godot is that certain combinations of key mapping gets a little bit glitchy. Like, I forget which one it was here. Let me see. If I'm holding down the directional button, the sprint button, and the dash button, and try to jump as I'm going to the left, see, I'm walking to the left, I can't jump. I can't jump either direction. So if I'm holding both sprint and dash down, I can't jump. But that's only with the keyboard controls. When I actually use my controller, I have no problem with that. I could be holding this down, and I still jump no problem. Dashing, sprinting, so either way, you want to go about it. If you want to use the keyboard controls, just know that there's a bit of a glitch, and I'm going to share. I'm going to put this up on itch.io, and I'll share this project folder with you, so that way you can play around with it and look at the script and use it and modify it and play with it, and then add whatever you want into your own project. But just be aware of that. You might want to go in and play with different controller mappings, or just use a game controller like I'm doing, however you think. Anyway, take care, God bless, and happy coding.